Hello everybody, Dark Ninja here, and today I'm going to be doing some commentary videos, or a commentary video on some Onslaught. So this season, the season of the Azure Manticore, so far I am 11th on the leaderboard on the North American server, got the legend rank secured, 5,200 points, and my win rate so far is 55.4%, which is pretty good. But I don't want to claim to be the best Onslaught player or anything in this video. There's some people out there who are getting like around 60% win rate, in fact. But um, I am a decent authority on Onslaught. I'm on a pro team, Dopa, who will be representing North America this fall and November in China for the International Onslaught Tournament. So I've got a rough idea about how to play Onslaught, and so I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks in this video. And first thing we're going to start out with is I'm going to go over which tanks you should be playing. And then after that, and then I'm going to go over some replays and tell you my thought process during those games and kind of explaining how the battle unfolds a lot of the time on those different maps. So let's first start off with which tanks you should be playing. So what I've done, I own, I think, every single Onslaught viable tank except for maybe like the M48 patent, and arguably that's not very Onslaught viable. So I have all the tanks, and out of all the tanks that I own, these are the ones that I would consider viable in Onslaught. There's a couple others like the T57 Heavy and like I don't know, Yag, some others that you could use, like even 4K5 is possible to use. But realistically, these are the ones that I'm only ever going to use, and so I put them on my primary tab. And as you can see, I'm just gonna select which ones are my favorite personally. My favorite ones that I've been spamming have been the E50M, the 268 version 4, the Bat Chat, the Bliskowice, and it's literally probably 80% of my battles, or not 85%, are those four tanks. But I want to be very clear in that I don't necessarily recommend most players to be playing a Bat Chat, or even necessarily an E50M. I can get away with playing a Bat Chat because I know how to play the Bat Chat very well. But oftentimes, the most optimal strategy to have on some of these maps is just to have a bunch of tank destroyers and heavy tanks, and then maybe one or two Bat Chat players, or like a light tank and a Bat Chat or two. And you might not necessarily be the best person to be in that role in that battle, simply because there are players in that lobby who are higher rank and are probably more capable in those tanks, which is just an unfortunate reality. We can't be having 7 Bat Chat players all playing, and so I would recommend playing more heavier tanks if you're not as skilled, or if there's players in your lobby who are like higher rank than you who are picking those kind of tanks. And so for if you're like champion or lower in general, I would say some good tanks to pick. E50M is still a good choice for a lot of maps, especially if your team needs some medium tanks. Other good choices, I would say the 60 TP is a really good choice if your lineup needs heavy tanks. CS63 for some maps like El Haluf could potentially be useful if you get a good spawn. Bliskowice, I think, is a really good choice, whether you're good or not the best player in your lobby. I think it's a good choice. And then the V4, I think, is a good choice as well. These other ones, I would not recommend unless you really know what you're doing, and that is the RHM Panzer. I don't even feel comfortable playing this most of the time. In fact, my win rate in it, in this mode, is not even good. Like, and I'm a pretty good player, but the light tank is just extremely hard to play. So if you look, this is my stats for Onslaught this season. And in my RHM Panzer over 32 battles, I only have 47% win rate because there's just a lot of good RHM players out there on the enemy teams. And I'm not a bad light tank player either, so it's just tricky to make it work sometimes. And in lower elo lobbies, a lot of the time, as you'll see is a trend, you aren't playing the offside as often. Teams just usually don't when you're in lower elo lobbies, and by that I mean lobbies where there are no legends in the player list or champs, sometimes even just no champs or legends. Teams are often just going to bring a bunch of heavy tanks and go fight each other rather than play on the offside on maps like Stuzianki, couple other maps that I'm forgetting right now. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend RHM Panzer unless you really, really know what you're doing. Leopard 1 is a tank that I only bring on like Glacier, and I wouldn't recommend it unless you really know what you're doing. Same with the Grill, just don't bring it unless you know what you're doing. I7 and 277, I feel like they're pretty weak in general. I don't think they're great tanks. I think 60 TP is better. E50M is better. In the case of like the 277, but they do have some niche cases where they're the best tank for the job, so I still have them in my priority list. V4 is just a great tank to run it down on maps like Ensk, or when you want to push the heavy side on, for example, Live Oaks, if you're going to YOLO that side, or Himmelsdorf, for example. I generally prefer the Bliskowitz to the V4, but the V4 is probably easier to play because it has better armor. Centurion Action X, it's a good tank, but you only ever want to have one of them because its ability is Inspire, which it doesn't help to have two Inspire tanks on your team because they don't stack. Gives a bonus to the rest of your team in terms of crew skill. And I would only ever use this on maps where you're going to be using your gun depression, and you want to make sure your team has enough heavy tanks before you decide to pick a Kex. Batchat is an extremely powerful tank. It's probably my favorite Onslaught tank besides the Bliskowitz. If you're a really good player and you can play the offside well by yourself or with a platoon mate or with just another medium player, or in higher elo lobbies where pretty much everyone is going to the offside, it's still a great tank. So it's just, if you're a good player, it's just a good option in general for almost every map. 50B is kind of niche. Again, I wouldn't pick it unless you know what you're doing. It's good on a few maps. Foch B. Now this one I haven't actually played all that much, but it definitely has a lot of potential. And so I don't know if it's a great tank for players who are less experienced, but it's a very, very powerful tank. BZ75 you pick for El Haloof and Westfield, and that's pretty much it. Maybe another map, but I'm forgetting. But CS63, I mostly just pick this for potentially Airfield and El Haloof, and that's pretty much it. Maybe Klondike. 60p, just a generic heavy tank, which is great in a lot of situations. Bliskowitz, a tank destroyer that you can play very aggressively, and it gets the ability, just like the V4 Juggernaut, which reduces the amount of hit points you take. But it makes your track. It also increases the ram damage you do, and it makes it so that your tracks are destroyed in a single shot. But this tank, I'll quickly show you my stats in the tanks. This tank is my favorite tank, definitely, for Onslaught. Besides, I mean, Batcha is kind of close, but as you can see, I'm getting 63% win rate in it, which my average is 55, so that's good. And I'm doing 4k average damage in it, which is probably my highest out of any tank. Anyways, let's move on to the next part. There's one thing which I should mention before I move on to the next section of the video. I need to talk about equipment. So for Onslaught, you definitely want to be running turbo hardening rammer on any single tank that can run that loadout, pretty much. So all heavy tanks, except for the 50B, which can't run a rammer, in which case I run a V-stab instead. And then for medium tanks like the E50M, I run that loadout. The only one where I kind of feel like you don't necessarily need to run turbo. You need hardening on every single tank, by the way. The only one where I think you could run no turbo is maybe the 430U. You could run V-stab instead because its gun handling, especially when it doesn't have its ability, is pretty terrible. So for tank destroyers like the V4 and the Bliskowitz, I also run turbo hardening rammer. For the Foch B, you can't run rammer, so instead I run vents to improve the reload. Then the only other really only ones to consider that are different than that, basically standard loadout, are the Bat Chat, where it can't run rammer, so I run vents instead. You can also run a V-stab, but I definitely would run turbo hardening and then either V-stab or vents, probably. You can also run hardening, V-stab, vents, that's fine as well. For the RHM, I think that the best loadout is going to be some combination of hardening, rammer, and then there's a couple different options. Radio set is pretty standard. You can also run turbo. You can also run vents. I'd say vents is the next one, which is a solid choice. But yeah, that's pretty much it for equipment. Let's get into the first battle. I'm probably gonna do it on Ensk. Also, by the way, sorry for doing all this zooming in and out. I always forget to not do that because people have been leaving comments about that, and I always forget not to do that, so sorry about that. Okay, so for our first replay, I think this video I'm just going to do Ensk, one battle from each side. So on Ensk, tanks that I like to play, I almost always play 268 version 4 or Bliskowitz. Which one I choose usually just depends on what I'm feeling. Usually from the south spawn, I'll pick 268 version 4, and from the north, I'll pick Bliskowitz. I think some other decent options would be Foch B. I think it's good to have from both sides one mouse, like just one mouse pretty much. But in general, I think the ideal comp for this map is pretty much maybe one 430U, a mouse, and then the rest all tank destroyers. Bliskowitz, V4, Foch B. I especially like the V4 in the Bliskowitz for this map. I don't really mess around with things like 57 heavy or any other medium tanks like Batchet or E50M. So as you can see in this match, we spawn north. And usually when I play, I don't have a set thing that I'm going to do. I'll usually react based on what my team is doing. So in a second, I switch from a mouse to a Bliskowitz because we already have a mouse, and I think 2 mice is probably going to be overkill. I don't think 2 mice is necessarily bad, it's just I need to play a tank that can play on the offside. Since I'm a good player in this lobby, it's more impactful for me to play a tank that can be more flexible than a mouse. But you know, if I was on the bottom of the list, then maybe I would pick a mouse, if we didn't have one already. But as you can see from our comp, we got an okay comp. We've got a Foch B, my platoon mate, I'm platooning with Ethan. We've got a Batchet though, and a 277. We're kind of light, and so for that reason, I don't really think it's going to be a good idea for us to push the east. So I'm hoping my team will go mostly west. Usually when your team all goes, I can't make my minimap bigger. Let me start the battle. Usually when your team all goes west, the best case scenario is that you have one person in a really good tank to hold like A0, and you just stay back here and then see what comes field, and then you just hold A0 if like in a Bliskowitz is the most ideal tank for it in my opinion, or 430U also kind of works. Then the rest of your team goes, you know, 5 line and city if you're not contesting the east. But this battle, since we're so light, I decided to go help my team in the city, just in case they need help pushing through, because since we have like a Batchet, you know, we could definitely lose the city fight still. Our mouse is going down the 5 line, which is good, towards the cap. And as you can see, I'm zoomed way out, and so this is one first important tip for this map. If you aren't getting any information on what's coming to the city, which you usually aren't going to be able to get that information unless you have like a fast tank that comes here and shoots down walls right here and looks through this gap, or if you have like a light tank, which isn't going to be the case in randoms, you can actually zoom out, and if you turn your camera like this, in the corner of the screen, you can see these walls right here. It's hard to see probably on a video format, but there's some walls here, and I can see that none of these walls are broken, which means that they have 0 tank city. Because you have to knock over at least one of these walls in order to come to the city. If I notice that there's more than one wall knocked over, then I know that there's probably several tank city, and so that's the first tip. I'm looking at the walls. I see that none of them are down, and so I'm already telling my team through voice comms and telling my platoon mate that they're all east, all of them. And so immediately when I see that, I turn away from the city. I'm gonna let our Batchat and Foch B get the strike and the spotting thing. My immediate goal right now, since I assume that they're all east, is to get to this position here and shoot through this gap in these train cars to get some free shots in as they push to the east, and some spots as well. So I spot the Sen AX, and I'm just pulling up here and just pre-aiming. But I aimed too high on the 60 DP, so I missed out on that shot. Now, if you look at the current situation, our V4 is playing properly. He's playing very defensively in the north in case they push through. And right now we have information on where all of them are. They're all east, like I assumed. And we have triple cap pressure. Now, the thing to note is they're going to get this arty strike, so triple cap pressure is kind of useless right now because they're just going to strike us and then get on the cap, and then the cap pressure isn't really doing too much. Now, because this is not like a professional lobby or anything, they're still going to be forced onto the cap probably because they don't know that they can just strike and then maybe push one of the sides, like the south or the north. They're just going to drive straight at the cap, and I kind of am anticipating that. So instead of sitting on the cap and waiting for the strike, my plan is to either come with my platoon mate and this Batchat to go push out the south, or more realistically, if these guys push in onto the cap, then I can get an off angle on them rather than just sitting behind this building. And you know, the Bliskowitz has terrible gun arc. I would just have to pull around the corner and trade with them rather than getting free damage if I wanted to fight those guys who are pushing towards the cap. So I pull over here expecting them to get on the cap, and they do start getting on the cap. This Foshby is just yellowing in. As you can see, there's a fight going on in the south, which I am keeping my eye out on. But right now, I'm trying to get as much damage as I can on these guys on the cap. Now, this Fosh B has, if you look at the map, he has overextended a little bit. He's way too far pushed up. All three of us can, and our 60 TP can all just peek him and then just kill him right now. And so, in a second here, looking at the fact that the South doesn't necessarily look like we're gonna win it, but like because their E4 is helping them, and our Batchat is not a great tank for that. I tell our Mouse to push in, and I tell these guys to push in. We need to win the North because it's not guaranteed that we're gonna win the South. Like we probably shouldn't win the South. But for now, I pop my ability, making it so that the Fosh B does less damage to me per shot. I had level 3, which is great, so I only take 600 damage from 2 shots. And I'm instantly pushing in. Now this is where the Bliskowitz can just go crazy because I'm taking reduced damage. And as you can see, I'm using Bond HP. This 705A is 3200 health. I have 2990, so I have like only 200 less health than him, but since I have my level 3 ability, I can just basically tank hits for my team. Now this isn't always advised to be the first one in if you're like at the top of the list in your lobby because you want to survive until the end, but I know for a fact that if we just kill these tanks here, it's gonna increase our chances of winning greatly. So I just decided to drive in, kind of like, I guess, encouraging my team to push in with me because they're gonna see me pushing and they're gonna know, okay, I need to support that guy. As you can see, I focused the Ho-Ri first because he has much higher DPM than the 705A. I mean, it is a much more dangerous tank. And I pop my ability and angle well, so the 60p bounces me, hits my track. I'm trying to focus fire here, but I don't really have great shots, and as you can see, I'm kind of low on HP. I only have 1000 HP, so now it's time for me to get safe and let my heavy tanks take the hits. Now, as you can see, we actually did lose in the south, or at least it looks like we're going to lose the south. And so we still have some pressure on us to actually push right now, but thankfully our V4 and 60TP and mouse are all pushing in, so we're up in this battle. You can see we're up 3k. We're up guns as well. I just need to stay alive now and support my team. I'm gonna speed this up a little bit because the battle's basically over. It's just them two left now. Shoot the 60. The other thing about this ability is it increases your ram damage quite considerably and decreases the amount that you take from ramming. So you can ram any tank in the game with the Bliskowice except for like a mouse. So definitely be using that ability to ram people as well. But yeah, as you can see, we come out with the victory and I get 7.2k damage. Pretty solid battle, and a lot of that was down to communicating with my team, recognizing when we need to push, recognizing that their whole team was going to be east, and rotating properly to prepare for them getting on the cap. Alright, let's go to the next battle. Alright, now we're on the south side of Ensk. How I like to play the south side, I prefer the south side to the north side because I feel like it's a little bit better in the east, and because it's a lot easier to get information at the start of the battle about where their whole team is going. And the way that you find the information, I'm going to show you in this battle. So in my opinion, same composition as the other side is kind of good. So like one mouse, 60 TPs, V4s, Bliskowices, and then maybe one 430U or something like that. Fosh B is okay as well. Unfortunately, our comp this game is not great. We have a 50B and a 4K5, so we're pretty soft. Now, here's how you get the information. So, usually, I like to be in a tank that is fast enough to get this information myself, just in case my team doesn't get it. So, usually, people fight in the east from both sides. That's usually the case. Sometimes you'll have a couple people fight in the city, but usually it's an east-centered map, at least in randoms. But the way you get the information is you just drive straight down this rail, this line, and then spot through this gap here. What you will spot, if you're fast enough, which the V4 is, the V4's view range is not great, so it won't spot medium tanks, but it'll spot pretty much any other tank, usually, because this spawn, if you look on the minimap, spawns more to the east than this side does. You will get here in time to spot slow tanks going into the east, and that will tell you roughly how many tanks they have going into the east. Another thing to mention is just like on the other side with these walls here that you can see in third person if they are knocked over, there's some walls which you can't really see from this angle unless you're behind this building. They're like right here or so. If you're going city from this side, you can zoom out and look at these walls and see how many of these walls are knocked over to get a rough idea of how many tanks are going to the city. And combined with this information that I'm about to get by driving down this rail, you can have a pretty good idea of where their whole team is going to be. Now, I won't spot medium tanks going to A0, that's the one, or to the field. That's the one thing I don't spot because my view range is very poor and they have good camo. But yeah, that's my first goal in this battle, is just to see how many tanks are coming east. As you can see, my team has deployed to the east as well. I'm just driving down, trying to make sure I got as much information as I possibly can get. Kind of using this thing as cover. As you can see, we're committed onto the strike with our I-7. My platoon mate Ethan is in the field, which is a really good spot for 430U, just to kind of hold them at bay. And the rest of our team is all on the east as well. And we've spotted 6 tanks. So I know that probably their whole team is here, minus maybe 1 tank. And I'm already thinking, I usually don't commit into this area right away unless I know that we have a big overmatch here, or even just a slight overmatch. But right now we don't have an overmatch. It's just going to be a stalemate over here. I want to break this stalemate, or what I assume to be a stalemate, by going to the offside. And in particular, I want to get to this position. It's the position that I showed in the first game in the Bliskowice, where I shoot through this rail and you get a clear line of sight onto the side of this E50M and onto the field. But I have to be careful because they still have one unlit tank, and as you can see, this 268v4 is still on the rails. So he can always just rotate back to here and come push me. Especially if, you know, their last unspotted tank is also in the city. But I'm feeling like this risk is worth it because I expect that they probably have someone A0. Or if they do have someone field, then if this guy doesn't rotate, then I can just go 1v1 the guy who's on the offside. So I decided to go offside. Especially because we have a 4K and a 50B. We're not going to win this fight over here. We're slowly going to lose, most likely. So I need to make a play somewhere. And so I'm trying to make my way towards the offside. It looks kind of scary to do this, but I'm thinking about just driving like this. Trying to find a timing where I won't get shot by these guys. They're already pushing up in the field, so our guys on cap are not in a great spot. But their V4 is still staying back. As you can see, he's a legend player, so I'm paying extra attention to him, and this is another tip. It's good to focus like the legend players or the champ players if you're in like a champ lobby where champ is the top. It's always a good idea to focus them. I use my ability right before he shoots at me. Just because, you know, you want your ability to be active as long as possible. So I always activate it right before I get shot. But now I'm going to that position, getting those side shots. Their V4 isn't spotted right now. But now he gets spotted, he's close. And as you can see, all 7 of their tanks are spotted. Their 430U got lit in the field. I didn't spot him in my initial push up here in the beginning. As I said, I wouldn't spot medium tanks to go field. And now we know that their whole team is here. And so I'm in a really ideal spot here to get these side shots on the 60TP and E100. And I just have to be careful not to get pushed by this V4 or if the 430U decides to rotate to the offside. But besides that, this is just free farm now. But, you know, their team, I'm struggling to find these shots through here, kind of. But I shoot their V4. Now, if you pay attention on the minimap, 3 of their tanks are rotating, or at least falling back. And I see their E50M in particular, he's coming this way. And their V4 could push through like this, potentially, so it's kind of scary. And so I start backing up. Their team realizes that they're in a bad spot, so they have to do something about me, and so I'm expecting them to flank me now from the north. Still trying to get a shot on this 60CP. Probably could have turned for the E50 sooner, but it's fine. I used my ability. Maybe I shouldn't have, and then I take a bad shot here. Now here, I try to YOLO this guy. Usually if you're in a tank destroyer, because you have this ability, you can 1v1 pretty much any tank. Especially if you get ram damage off. So even this E50M, I'm thinking I'll probably be able to 1v1 him, especially because he's not, you know, a champ or legend. So I go after him, which is kind of greedy, but I still, in retrospect, it might not have been the best play to just YOLO this guy, because we probably should win the field. Because Ethan is eventually going to kill this 60 TP. But I decided to go for it anyways. I do this a lot in the Bliskowice and the V4, where I just YOLO people. Probably irresponsibly, but it usually works out, so I tend to do it anyways. Now keep in mind, when you use this ability, your track becomes one-hittable. So you have to be very careful about using it. And in fact, right here, the only reason I was able to come around this corner because I get one-tracked is because I have a repair kit, but it's still pretty risky to do this. Like, if he caught my track here, then I could have got permatracked and died. But one thing I wasn't paying attention to is their V4 actually managed to come through here, and he's coming for me. Now it's not a coincidence that he's coming for me. It's partly because, you know, it's a 2 vs 1 if he comes and gets me, but also I'm pretty sure he can see that I'm a legend, and he's going for me for that reason. Which isn't, like, a bad play. Like, that's the correct thing to do, probably. But the 350M bounces me, thankfully. And right here, I'm pretty much dead. I'm just trying to get out as much damage as I can before I die, and so I get out one more shot. But their V4 left the east, which means we should have a little bit more of an advantage over here. But as you can see, this game is still very close. We're up 2.5k, but I'll just speed it up a little bit. Ethan has a 1v1 in the field where they're both two-shot. We still have a 4k, which please just don't play 4k5, guys. It's just not a good tank. Even if you do like 4,000 damage in your 4k5, it's just usually not a great tank for taking hits, and for playing key positions and for pushing in, so it's just not a good Onslaught tank in my opinion. Unless you really know what you're doing. So Ethan dies here. Now it's a 2v2. And I'll just speed this up. Thankfully our i7 knew what he was doing. So even though our 4k dies, our i7 gets E100 in a second. And finishes off the 430U. And we end up winning. Did 3.7k damage, blocked 1800. I kind of forced their team to do something in this situation by playing the offside. Probably shouldn't have YOLO'd the E50M and should have just played more passive, but it's okay. Now, one thing that I want to mention is a lot of the time, it's a big mistake that I see, especially on Ensk. This happens a lot. Your offside tank spends time getting the strike like over here when their whole team is fighting in here. Now, if you initial and immediately go to the strike for some reason, then yeah, maybe it's worth it to do that. But if your whole team is fighting over here, like, you shouldn't be, like, if you're over here, you shouldn't be driving all the way out to the strike just while your team is fighting. Like, you need to get in the fight. The strike does 400 damage. If you get lucky and strike 3 people, that's 1200 damage. You can do that in 2 shots with the V4. So, like, it's usually more important for you to be in the fight and sharing your HP with your teammates. So that's one thing that I thought I would mention. Is don't go way out of your way for strikes. In all situations, it's not always worth it to just go for strikes, even if it's for free. But yeah, that's pretty much a brief rundown of Ensk and what my thought process is on this map, and what tanks I would bring, etc. Hope you all enjoyed. Probably will upload a few other Onslaught videos, because I've gotten a request for that in the coming days, so stay tuned for that. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and share with your clanmates if they're looking for advice on Onslaught. Goodbye.